All right, now we're going to talk about how to use your sources and how to avoid plagiarism. First, we're going to talk about how do we integrate our source material. So you've read whatever your articles are. How do you put them in your paper in an effective way? The first thing you want to do is organize your own ideas before you do anything else. Okay, that way you won't get confused about what was your idea versus what was the source's idea. So after you've organized how you feel about the topic, you'll want to find your sources. You'll want to read them, certainly, and you'll want to annotate them, and that means take notes. And you want to make sure that you really understand what the source is saying. If you don't really understand it, you'll probably have to read it a couple of times. Then after you've done that, you want to draw connections between your ideas and the source material. This is called the synthesis. You want to synthesize your ideas and the source's material. Now don't worry if you don't agree with every source. Don't worry if you agree with part of what they're saying, but not all of what they're saying. That's totally fine. Okay? You don't have to agree with everything that you read. And then once you have done all of this, you either want to quote your material, you want to paraphrase your material from your source, or you'll want to summarize the source material, okay? There's a nice list of verbs on page 175 of Quick Access that can help you really integrate your source material in an effective way. So first we're going to talk about quotes. Quotes are the author's exact words. So word for word, whatever you read from this article, you would put it into your paper. We use quotes to provide evidence from experts. When you have an expert, it's nice to quote them to get word for word. It makes you look like you've done your homework. But you only want to quote it when the source's authority is essential. If we definitely need to know what, I don't know, the director of the Red Cross said, then you definitely want to quote him or her. If the language is exceptional, okay, if it's written so beautifully you could never replicate it, it's just that awesome, then go ahead and quote it. Sometimes you want to distance yourself from a source because you want people to know you don't agree with whatever your source is saying, and that's a good time to quote. Sometimes you want to quote because a source is difficult to paraphrase. Now this happens if you have a lot of jargon, like a lot of language particular to a certain genre, if you have a lot of medical terms or a lot of legal terms or something like that, or if you have a lot of numbers. If there are lots of statistics or something like that, it's probably not worth your time to try to paraphrase it. That's when it's best to go ahead and quote it. So how do you actually quote this material? If you have your source and you've got what you want, you know what you want to put in your paper, how do you do that? You always want to put quotation marks around the source's words, and you also need to provide an in-text citation. An in-text citation is the author's last name and page number. If you don't have an author, you will have an article title. That's what you would use instead. You want to avoid dropping quotes randomly throughout the essay, okay? Otherwise, your essay just looks like quote, 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 quote. One way to avoid doing that is to introduce your quote, to tell us who is speaking and what is his or her credential. For example, according to Emily Murdoch, a college English instructor, citing your sources is very important. So we have who it's according to, Emily Murdoch, and we have her credentials. She's a college English instructor. If you don't have that credential, then you don't know who Emily Murdoch is, and you have no reason to believe that she knows anything about citing sources. Please note that the quote is in quotation marks, and please notice that we have provided an in-text citation, meaning we know who our author is. It's Emily Murdoch, and we know what page number this quote came from, which would be 242. There are some pitfalls that you will want to avoid when you quote your material. Don't use too many quotes. You really don't want more than a quarter of your paper to be quoted material. Otherwise, all you've shown is that you can copy and paste stuff. So you want to paraphrase if you can. Also, you want to avoid quotes that are too long, like more than 4 typed lines is kind of too long. You know when you're reading stuff, if it goes on forever, you tend to sort of skim over it and you don't really pay much attention to the content of it, and we don't want our readers to do that. We want our readers to be paying attention to what we're saying. Something you can do is quote a part. Like if there's, I don't know, a few lines that you really want to use, you can quote the part of it that's really, really great, and then paraphrase the other part of it. So you can double dip a little bit with that. And certainly you can refer to Quick Access, pages 176 to 179, for a more comprehensive explanation of quotes and for more examples. Okay, so now we're going to move over into paraphrases. When you paraphrase, you're basically taking your source's ideas and you're putting them in your own words. Paraphrases are pretty detailed, more detailed than a summary, and they tend to focus on one idea rather than the article as a whole. So just paraphrases work with like a main idea of a paragraph or a main idea of a section or something like that. It's not the entirety of the article. You will definitely want to paraphrase more than you quote because it's a higher order thinking kind of thing. It's a lot easier to copy and paste someone else's words than it is to read someone else's words, think about someone else's words, and be able to re-articulate those in your own way. So we always want to paraphrase more than we quote, and we want to provide a citation for our paraphrases. So how exactly do you paraphrase? I would suggest you reread your source until you fully understand its meaning, okay? And then I would set it aside, because what happens is if you have your source out, it's really easy to accidentally plagiarize, meaning taking someone else's words or ideas just because it's just right there, so it's really easy to look at it. So I would put it away. And then you want to put whatever the information is in your own words with your own vocabulary and your own sentence structure. Then I would suggest you check it against the original, get that source out again. That way you'll make sure you're not plagiarizing, that you're not using their exact words and phrases. And then of course you'll want to record the citation information, which is again the author's last name and page number. And once again, if you don't have an author, if you're using an article that doesn't have an author or a website that doesn't have an author, you would use the title of the article or the title of the website. All right, now we're going to move on to summaries. A summary is a statement of the main point of an article. Okay, it's the main point of an extended work. Paraphrases, again, just work with a particular section or a particular paragraph, whereas a summary is the main point of the work as a whole. Summaries are usually only 2 to 3 sentences. They're not very long. We don't have a lot of really detailed information in them. They do still need citations, though, because they're someone else's ideas, and we always want to give credit to someone else's ideas. So you, again, put the author's last name and page number, or again, if you don't have an author, you use the article title. So now since we've talked about how to quote and how to paraphrase and how to summarize, we have an idea of how to put those things together. And when you put those together correctly, you are making sure that you do not plagiarize, okay? And as you know, plagiarism is taking someone else's words or ideas without giving credit, okay? Without giving credit means without putting in the correct citations. And we'll talk more about MLA citations and the details of that next week. For now, it's enough for you to know that whenever you take information from an outside source, you have to have an in-text citation. A parenthetical citation is the same thing, an in-text and a parenthetical. And you have to give the author's last name and the page number. If you don't have an author, you use the article title. When you do write your paraphrases and summaries, you want to make sure that your writing is really different in terms of sentence structure and word choice. Otherwise, it's really easy to plagiarize. Sometimes students get confused about what they should plagiarize and what they shouldn't plagiarize. I'm sorry, don't plagiarize. Sometimes students get confused about what they should cite and what they shouldn't cite, and that is understandable. Basically, you should not cite common knowledge. Okay, so if you think the generally educated audience knows something, you don't need to cite it. But sometimes knowing what the generally educated audience knows and what they don't know can be tricky. So if I were you, I would always provide a citation if you're in doubt. Okay, if you're not really sure, should it be cited, should it not be cited, you can always ask me, certainly. But it's always a good idea just to provide that in-text citation. In this class, you'll never get in trouble for over-citing something. Okay, worst comes to worst, I'll write on your paper, you're clearly confused about when to cite, so let's talk about that, which is pretty low stakes. So when you're not sure, go ahead and cite it. And that wraps up quoting and paraphrasing and summarizing and avoiding plagiarism. So if you have any questions, let me know.